Hi everyone, welcome to Emily's Great Big World of Facts. Today's very first debut video is all about the brain. The brain is the most complex organ in the human body, made up of billions, that's a big number, of neurons. The job of the brain is to control other organs. Now that's a very simple way of putting it, but overall, the brain helps to control your body and other organs. Now the brain looks like a very big, confusing, complex blob, but overall, we can think of the brain as being divided into three separate areas: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. This arrow is pointing to the cerebrum, the biggest part of the brain. This arrow is pointing to the cerebellum, and this arrow is pointing to the brainstem. Now, back to the cerebrum. The cerebrum itself, if we're looking at it from the top, like you're looking at the top of someone's head, is divided into two sections, two hemispheres, a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. Furthermore, each hemisphere has four lobes. So you can think of the brain, specifically the cerebrum, as having eight lobes, four for each hemisphere. Now, when looking at the lobes, the first one is called the frontal lobe. Now, it's not that the frontal lobe is the very first one. You can think of them in any way you want, but the way I've made this video, we're going to think of the frontal lobe as the first one. Then we have the parietal lobe, then we have the temporal lobe, and then we have the occipital lobe. So that's one, two, three, four lobes per hemisphere. Now, I always get these confused. So, easy trick to remembering them is that the frontal lobe is in the front, F for front. The parietal lobe is right where that arrow is, kind of on top of the brain. So, I imagine the brain has a ponytail, and the ponytail is where the parietal lobe is. The way I remember the temporal lobe is the word temple. Sometimes I see people who have a headache and they rub this area on the side of their head called the temple. So that's exactly where the temporal lobe of the brain is, and that's how I remember temporal lobe. Then we have the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is in the back of the head or the back of the brain, and I remember the word out for occipital, as if the occipital lobe is coming out of the brain. So here we have it, the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes of the cerebrum. Next, this arrow is pointing to the cerebellum, which is much smaller than the cerebrum. The job of the cerebellum is to give you balance and posture. Now, that's a very easy way of putting it. The cerebellum does a lot more than that, and it's very complicated, but overall, the cerebellum is what allows you to do this and what allows you to do this: balance and posture. Now, for the brainstem. You can only see a little bit of the brainstem in this video, but the way I remember what the brainstem does is I think about the word stem, brain stem. Here we have a brain and a photo of a stem. What does a stem do? It gives support to a plant. Leaves come off of a stem. So I think of the stem as support and the brainstem as supporting the brain and the body. In addition to support, the brainstem is also like a highway. It's how things go from the brain to the body and from the body back up to the brain. So there you have it. We have the brain, we have the cerebrum, which is the biggest of the three parts, we have the cerebellum, which is important for balance and posture, and then we have the brain stem, which is like a plant stem that supports your brain, sending signals to and from the brain. This guy here has a brain, and that arrow is depicting the brain stem and how things can go out and also into the brain. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was educational, and don't forget to like and subscribe to learn a lot more about different facts in the world.